Back to Apocalypse and Genesis. If you're concerned this is endgame, the way the fools are playing in Washington and the Middle East, well, you're in good company. The Babylonians tried to warn us of this time and its associated star signs. Some people base their predictions on this or that Bible verse, on this or that story from the New York Times or the Drudge Report. Personally, I've been freaking out about the star signs since 2010, taking a zodiac reportedly designed by the son of Enki thousands of years ago as something deadly serious. Speaking of the Son of God, Jesus visited a dear friend of mine last week. His message, I got you, and it's all done. Then he gave her a big hug, but his arms were bleeding. As on my last video, I consulted one of the AI engines on a hunch that the festivals observed ceremoniously by the ancients had a serious aspect to them. If they were formerly used as an occasion for killing people and animals or handing your wealth and produce over to some guys in robes, it must have been with some sort of quid pro quo in mind, like protection from a well-known curse or to secure more blessings in your family's future. Our first big warning of the year came around the spring equinox, but the sun did not lash out immediately. It took a few weeks. This morning's warning came from the book of Job. Apparently soon, the sons of God will shout for joy. Venus was stunning, though my old eyes couldn't catch the other two in the LA smog. The stories we are told around the religious festivals mean one thing to us as children, and if we reflect on them later in life, we will find both purpose and eternal truths. Like Samson between the pillars was probably not a sign about how not to trust women. This morning, all the riddles of Job 38 rang out, as they must have for the days of the last creation. The first great lesson of the sun as we grow up is that this planet wobbles like a top each year. Earth tips to expose the north in the spring as the other side of the planet begins to darken for winter. And at the next equinox, we switch and do it again the other way. Something our ancestors also noticed during the precession is that every 6,500 years or so, the planet must accommodate the changes that happened during that time. For instance, look at the time Canaanites were worshiping El at the vernal equinox as the sun crossed into Orion 6,500 years ago, and that day doesn't happen now until the summer solstice. The sun flashed, an interplanetary Birkeland current grounded, and the planet fell. And that time we fell to the right, and Orion chased the Pleiades according to the myths. Now that the axis of the equinoxes is perpendicular to the Milky Way, and we have returned to the cosmic cross, the tree of life will fall to the left in the greater periodic wobble. Once every 6,500 years or so, there was an ekpirosis, a conflagration remembered by the Stoics. Society receives a great reset. It's what the billionaires who want you to live in desperation have been trying to tell you. Revelation 22 goes back to Genesis 1, when Elohim is ready to abolish the human race for making too much noise. Oh snap, maybe that's the Enuma Elish version. The thing to know is that we are again set to fall. And let's face it, we've 2 centuries of bad karma in foreign policy coming due if we're thinking the world is about to bail us out of the mess we've been making. No, it's probably time for some comeuppance. This stone made me think of the big festivals of the Israelites applied to this special time of the 4th ram. In verses like Exodus 23:14, 34:22, and Deuteronomy 16:16, the same God who said we would die if we ever saw his face demands we present ourselves before him 3 times a year. And sometimes Satan, the old serpent, shows up to the festivities. See Job 2. I believe the feasts were implemented to remember something powerful when the world's ancestors were punished for their transgressions, that the most powerful solar storms are again on the horizon, and we need to think about what happens when the grid goes down. There's a mystery on the bone boxes and the old coins and engraved on cliff walls. It says the universe is a god who spins around and around. Upon the fourth ram, he's going to strike this planet with fire. And last time it happened when Jupiter crossed Orion. At least one time he struck a place in Africa near a pivot of the planet called the Richat structure, and I'm not sure if that was the anode or the cathode of the operation. But that's the moment the great deep broke open, the earth fire erupted, and the poles shifted. If the eye of providence reveals itself near the next solar eclipse, the resultant Miyake event will be strangely close to where it grounded in the past. It's a spot in Mauritania from where I have a stone carved to look like the day Eagle ate a scorpion. They watched the hammer of Thor strike their home just before the world spun. My guess is that was the vernal equinox 20,000 years ago, Ram 1. The antipode of the Richat structure is Fiji, and the oceans show that's precisely where Earth will take a tumble. One of the central messages of the ancient cave paintings and clay tablets or papyri is that the way you've grown up thinking, this is it, this is how the world is soon to be overturned. That what we've always known as the central sky is quite simply upside down and backward from the way it was and must be, which is probably how Yahweh, God of the South, ended up God. Earlier people had called him Nergal, holding the keys of hell. Greeks called him Zeus Solima, indicating the importance of Jupiter to the proceedings. Apparently, the city of Jerusalem was named after him, Solima. So the first king of righteousness need not have been Hebrew. Last time the eye showed up at Orion near an eclipse on the equinoctial axis, but the artifacts show that it could show up at various spots along the way from the vernal equinox to the autumnal equinox. At Dendera, the Egyptians showed it involving the constellation Triangulum and the moon. And since the Babylonians were fond of new moon festivals, I would look to around April 27th as significant. This morning, a friend who unintentionally channels was asking what is significant about April 10th. And that is closer to when Triangulum would be pointing to the sun. Personally, I feel a solar event coming, and I don't know that science has figured out the key to when that happens. In Ica, Peru, it had something to do with Jupiter and Taurus, and their version of St. George and the Dragon involved Mars as a weapon. Notice they saw what's coming as a battle between El and Enki, between Aquila and Corvus, between Horon and Horus. I asked a friend to draw that stone on the upper right because it's engraved in such a way that you can never see the entire design from one angle. You can see, okay, this is just my interpretation, that the journey of the hero is to the south of Taurus, leaving Ursa Major behind in a flash of glory. You might recall the story of Inanna and Dumuzi traveling through the underworld, which is the journey of Mars flying past Leo Virgo, followed by Venus, going on between now and the end of the year. The Sumerians and Bactrians told us to start getting ready last year. Within the course of a month, we had the sign of Jonas, one from the Epic of Gilgamesh, and one from Edgar Cayce signing the Great War returning. But other civilizations also saw problems at the cosmic cross when Nibiru rides on high and Jupiter crosses the Milky Way. The Greeks may have been the ones to tell the story best. They had a contest between Poseidon and Athena to see who would name the city of the Acropolis, and a contest of Neptune at the first of Aries versus Virgo, location of the coming eclipse, in which Cecrops, the second king of the land, would be the judge. And he chose Athena, as she was born from the head of Zeus when Hephaestus, a cipher for Auriga, sliced Job's head open with an axe. Now, if the axe was the moon and Jove or Cecrops is Jupiter, then the big day would be around August 19th, which is when Athens celebrated the Panathenae to wrap up the month of Hecatombion. The stone on the right suggests the Greeks understood that Jupiter's crossing of the Milky Way and the sacrifice of Orion was a big deal. This is just a confirmation that some of the migrations into America were a full precession ago, when the oceans moved south in a pole shift and the glaciers were changing. The survival of humanity in the time of change requires us to be nomads. For example, in Ram 2, there was a big melting of the ice at the end of the Younger Dryas, and my Bunun ancestors living on the Taiwan Peninsula had to find high ground when the waters rose hundreds of feet. And at that point, it was easier to sail out of there than to fight all the other tribes being concentrated. Our ancestors knew about survival. It's why they could never live in one place for too long. My maternal line escaped China to become Native Americans. Mitochondrial DNA is supposed to run faithfully like a watch. You can estimate a stable mutation happening every 3,000 to 6,000 years. Estimates vary. So I must come from an extremely ancient lineage if you count up my mutations. That or my ancestors must have moved into a uranium mine when they got to British Columbia. My mother's people came from the far north end of the B2 populations, and the highest numbers by percentage of population are from places like Colombia, Peru, and Mexico. So I would favor there having been two routes out of China, one by land in the beginning and one by sea that came later, both the result of pole shifts and the oceans having to accommodate. Given that crossing the ocean seems to come every 12,000 years, we might have room for concern. I'm related to a tribe of Native Americans called the Sinite, and they had another story going back to Ram 2, in which the shaman was warned by a frog that disaster was coming, and the people should dig caves on the banks of the Columbia River before it happened. About half the tribe went south, never to be seen again. The ones who dug in survived, while all the Rocky Mountains burned. The people eventually came out when the ashes settled to live off roots and fish until the berries grew back and the animals returned. We settled at Frog Mountain in the Slocan Valley to remember the story. The guy on the far right was my third great-grandfather, the last hereditary chief. He had children by about 14 women from Revelstoke to Spokane, so 23andMe says I'm related to half the Northwest Territory. My dad's line also faced huge floods at the Black Sea and the Atlantic coast. When the planet shifted and Doggerland sank, as California is about to, people had to move inland, and this time pole shift is supposed to carry North America closer to the equator, where there happens to be a girdle of water 2 miles high to contend with before the crust adapts. In the Timaeus, Plato reports a war in which America, let's call her Atlantis, went to war with Europe's Mediterranean powers. In Africa, conquering all the way to Egypt, and in Europe all the way to Albania. And whatever they called NATO back then was battling these invaders. And he goes on, but afterwards there occurred violent earthquakes and floods, and in a single day and night of misfortune, all of Greece's men in a body sank into the earth, and the island of Atlantis in like manner disappeared into the depths of the sea, for which reason the Straits of Gibraltar ended up blocked, and the once feared America was reduced to a great shoal of mud and instantly forgotten by the old world. Why do they not teach us this stuff in history class? You might notice the heraldry of Osterod am Harz and Lower Saxony, from where Dad's ancestors lived 3,000 years ago. They contain some pretty clear warnings of our recurring problem of the cosmos. You have Leo with Crux ascendant between the pillars of the universe for Osterode. And I once asked a wise man what he thought of the shield of Lower Saxony. And he said, between the last fall of the earth 6,500 years ago and the next, Monoceros, the unicorn, gets his horn busted off, meaning that Pegasus in a field of blood is a perfect analogy for a 90-degree pole shift. The wise man happened to be a member of the Order of Pegasus, established to keep ancient artifacts out of the wrong hands. My grand theory, if you could call it that, is that the related Heinrich and Dansgaard Escher events are in their essence a sun cycle at the quarter precession, accompanied by a comet event. And you can debate all you want about the trigger mechanism, but a period of rapid climate change is upon us. I had a terrible nightmare last night. I saw the unholy disaster about to hit. It was an engineering disaster worse than anything Elon Musk could handle. Huge refugee camps, so poorly managed by FEMA we were breaking out to find food. All the young men were instantly conscripted. Food was stuck in pockets around the country, rotting for lack of distribution. The worst of it was the group of jerks thinking they were in charge. I can see why God periodically lets humanity self-destruct in the face of natural disaster. Once in a holy week of 7,000 years, he gets half a day off. The biggest problem of humankind is not that we're incapable of avoiding war or finding a more equitable way to distribute work and resources. No, our problem is that it's 100% more convenient to the aliens in charge to maintain society along the lines of a cult of death. Rather than invest in a system of health, we manage the production, maintenance, and distribution of disease. Rather than establish peace, it is infinitely more profitable to spend $1 trillion killing people to steal oil and rare earth minerals. And if it gets us all killed every 6,500 years, well, then so be it. We'll call it God's calendar, and that will be that. Our biggest hope then becomes the return of the dictators, a high priest and his king, our witnesses of the apocalypse in Genesis. The Trinity, Elohim, Yahweh, and the Holy Spirit that unites them are here. It's time to get to work. Hashem bless you and keep you now and forever. Take care.